This is the review for Exam 1, and we're going to do Part 1, the listening. So, on the screen you can see the first listening selection, and what I want to do is just kind of scroll through. Here's some ideas for you as you're preparing for this exam, just some strategies. Maybe the first thing is to consider that the first three are Baroque period selections. 4, 5, and 6, classical period. And of course, 7 through 10 need to be designated classical/romantic. This is a transitional work for Beethoven, and that would be required on the test to have classical/romantic. All right, so we've got that. We go back. Probably what I would do on my notes is mark down what is unique, different about each selection. Because what a person's worried about is getting mixed up, confusing one piece with another. So if you have in mind unique aspects of each selection, you're less likely to do that. So for number 1, what I would write down is single female singer. And that would be the only selection that I would play, if I played it on the test, where we heard only a female singer, where we didn't hear any men singing or, chorus or anything like that. So, single female singer. I would put down that the strings are very quiet. So that would be a good place to start. Dido's Lament. A lament's a really sad song. This is from the opera Dido and Aeneas. So hopefully that's not too hard to remember the title. Put an I in there, just think Dido, that's how it's pronounced. Should be easy on the spelling. The second part, you have to have recitative and aria. And of course, those are two terms that you need to know for the test anyway. So that's a good way to study and just think, what are these exactly? The recitative, the beginning part, of course, you hear more words, even the strings are softer than they are later, but it moves right on into the aria. You should write down also, this is in English. So if you hear an English word, you know that it's number 1. And what else? You need to, be sure you put down opera, that it's from the opera Dido and Aeneas. The third line, Baroque period. Finally, the man's name, Purcell, or if it's easier for you to remember, Purcell. That's how it's spelled. So that's what we need. For this particular test, I will, as we say, count off for spelling. So if you misspell a composer's name, that's not good. You probably lose a point. So for this test, try to be really careful with the composers' names. I have assigned extra points to the listening to compensate you for learning the longer titles for some of these. So you will get some extra points for that. So that would be 35 points as opposed to 30 on the last test. All right, so let's say we've got the first one figured out. We're just going to talk through it first. The second one is violin concerto. Looks like concerto. Concerto means with. It's a duet. There is some opposition between the orchestra and the solo violinist. Keep that in mind. But violin concerto, opus 8, number 1. And you do have to put down opus, which means work. This was early, a fairly early work. And in this set, he has 4 concertos, spring, summer, fall, and winter. We're just listening to spring, so it's number 1. So hopefully you can remember number 1, spring. And again, 1, it's the first movement. So that you all have to think of. You have to think of that entire label. You do not have to put in spring. That's optional. You do have to put in violin concerto, opus 8, number 1, first movement. Then in the second line, it's a bit redundant, but you put concerto again because concerto also describes the design or the form. There were hundreds, thousands of concertos written during this period. So this is just a template concerto, a generic name. For solo, there's just one, violin and string orchestra. If you can remember to put string orchestra, that would be good because it's a light orchestra. It doesn't have all the brass and all of that we're going to hear later with the classical and classical romantic concertos. Of course, it is Baroque. Vivaldi has an I in the beginning of his name and an I at the end. 2 V's. Just break it up somehow so you can remember this Italian composer, please. We move to St. Matthew Passion. Please note it's not St. Matthew's. It's just the account of the last week before Easter, the passion or the suffering of Jesus Christ. And so it's in the book of Matthew, referred to also as St. Matthew, the author. So what you want to do is go ahead and just put St. Matthew Passion. It is Christian, so try to remember to put that in. Christian art, music, and as you can see, we've got solo singers. So not just one solo singer, there's a woman at the beginning, but later there are men singing different ranges of solo men singers. There is a chorus and an orchestra. If I should play this one, you will for sure hear a solo singer, a chorus, and of course the orchestra. So if you don't hear a chorus on the test, then you know that it could not be St. Matthew Passion, because if I play this, I would play a clip that had the chorus in it. So that should give you a good idea where to really focus your listening. Baroque period, we put J.S. because he had 4 sons who became famous composers as well. So we usually go ahead and put Johann Sebastian or J.S. Bach. Pretty easy spelling. Hopefully don't put a K in there, just an H. All right, we go to 4, string quartet. Opus 33, number 2, in E flat major. That's a particular key that you have to try to remember. It is the last movement. It's real showy, so think, okay, it's real showy, exciting, unusual. 4th, it's at the end there. So the string quartet, Opus 33, number 2, he wrote this, sort of a medium period of his string compositional output. So you've got to remember 3/3. And as I had said in class, maybe if you think it's number 2, put a 2 in there. You've got 3/2/3. Maybe visually that helps you, but somehow you have to remember Opus 33, number 2, and you have to put down the key, E flat. So it's not just plain E, it's the color of E flat, major, so it's happy. String quartet for 2 violins, viola, and cello. You do have to tell me what's performing, what kind of performing group we have. So again, we see string quartet twice. That's because string quartet is a genre, a type, sort of a template for composition during the classical period. Hundreds of string quartets were written during the classical period. All right, so we've got that. Classical period, Haydn. His name is the tricky one to spell. People always want to put an extra vowel in there between the D and the N, but don't do it. It's just H-A-Y in German. A-Y sounds like I. So if it helps you to think Haydn, that's fine, but do not put a vowel between D and N, and then you'll be good. So H-A-Y-D-N, Haydn, that is the string quartet. Now, number 5 then has a much fuller sound. You don't just have 4 strings playing, but of course you have then the full symphony. Symphony number 40. Think to yourself, Mozart didn't live to be 40. Maybe that'll help to remember the number. Symphony number 40 in G minor. Think it's really good. It's a really good symphony, something like that. It's sad, so it's minor. It is the first movement. You want to remember which selections focus on the first movement or have the first movement that we listen to. and which don't. Most of them are going to be first. So symphony is in the second line because, again, we have in the classical period, the genre can be called by the same name as the title. And so again, you just put down symphony for orchestra. So that one's pretty easy to remember, the second line. Classical period, Mozart. We pronounce it like it has a T, but of course it doesn't have a T. It's just M-O-Z-A-R-T. Listen for the full symphony. Then we go number 6, 6 easy variations on a Swiss tune for piano. So number 6, 6 variations, and they're easy. He wrote them for a student, so a young person can play these. And based on a folk tune, on a Swiss tune, and they're 4 solo piano variations. So that you can hear when you're listening to it, you hear a theme, then you hear variations or some kind of elaboration of the theme. We need solo piano variations, classical, in this instance, Beethoven. If you need to think Beethoven, no problem, but just be sure that you do spell his name correctly on the test. Only piano on that one. Now we get into the trickier things, full orchestra, these Beethoven movements, and we have all 4 of them. The first movement is the famous one, and later on I'm going to slide back through and play opening themes for you and talk about music itself. But number 7 is the one that everybody knows, that has the Fate motive, short, 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 long. It has a pitch that starts in one place, goes down, and that is the first movement, C minor. It's sad. You have to remember C. Maybe you think it's classical romantic. Some way you've got to remember the C minor. And it is his 5th symphony out of 9 that he wrote. Again, we have the template name symphony, but you also have to indicate that it is sonata form or sonata allegro form. So that's a specific way of talking about how the movement is put together. And we know what sonata allegro form is. We talked about it in class. It's a term you need to know for the test itself. Classical romantic, it's a transitional work, and there's Beethoven's name again. The second movement, please write down, it is slower, dignified, calm. It's a complete change from the first movement, but it's still in C minor. So still symphony number 5 in C minor, but you have to think the second movement completely changes the attitude from the first movement. The symphony then is in what we call theme and variation form. Beethoven loved a theme and variation form to compose in. So what you heard at the very beginning, he just varies it, he just changes it throughout this entire second movement. And if I should play it on the test, I would play it so you could hear the theme very clearly. It is a dotted theme when it first starts, which makes it sound more majestic, royal, grand, and so on. Then we go back to more energy, more excitement. This one sounds kind of scary. It's supposed to. A scherzo, think scary. Scherzo is grotesque. That's what it means. So it's supposed to sound a little off kilter, a little tense, a little mysterious, and it does. So the third movement then is a scherzo and trio form. That is a 3-part form. You hear the scherzo, and again I'm going to play the themes later. You hear the scherzo, then you hear this contrasting middle section, and then you go back and hear the scherzo again. So scherzo trio looks like a 2-part form, but it is a 3-part form. It was understood at the time, and still today, that you always go back and do the scherzo. In the classic period, classic romantic period, they like the symmetry of a 3-part form. So scherzo and trio form is how you write it down. Beethoven. Finally, we're to the end here, the grand final movement, which is in C major. So this is confusing. You see, well, the symphony itself is in C minor. You have to label it that way. But the fourth movement, Beethoven breaks the rules and he puts it in C major. And it is in sonato allegro form, just like the beginning. It is fast, it's exciting, it's supposed to sound like a horse galloping, like a hero on a horse, that it's been described that way, and there are military references in this music. During this time, there were all kinds of battles and skirmishes throughout Europe. Beethoven would have been very aware of that, and the idea of the hero, the military hero, was pretty interesting to him. So I think you could say that's what you're hearing in this music. Same designation then for the third line. Okay, so now we go back through and just hear a little bit of each one. Number 1. Recitative, aria. You hear treble pretty clearly. You know that's Dido's Lament. The violin concerto, string orchestra. You hear the harpsichord underneath very clearly. Also a very distinctive ritornello or return theme. Number 3, a lot happening. Let's just kind of skim through it. The first part. You move on to the female singer. And of course I went right to an interlude that doesn't have the female singer. Let me see if I can catch it better here. So we have female. Yes. Let's keep going here. And I will have to stop there. I want to make it through this segment within 20 minutes. I think that's enough for you to get an idea. We have a string quartet. All right, so you get the sound of that, very light. Mozart Symphony, important theme. Finally, piano. Okay, pretty easy to recognize. Famous theme. First movement, second movement, grand. Slower, third movement.